The sound of the locker room door slamming echoed down the hallway like a gunshot, and in that sharp, humiliating silence, Marcus stood frozen with the small flashlight still trembling in his hand. If you had walked into Jefferson Middle School that morning, you would have seen nothing more than a hard-working single mother protecting her child. And maybe you would have done the same. Maybe you would have reacted even faster. Because when you believe someone has hurt your child, reason doesn't knock first. Fury does. Rachel Whitman had built her life around her daughter, Sophie. Ever since the accident on Interstate 75 5 years earlier had taken Sophie's sight, Rachel had become fierce in a way she never knew she could be. She learned Braille. She memorized every crack in their small Ohio apartment floor so Sophie wouldn't trip. She left a stable marketing job to work closer to the school. Every choice she made bent toward one purpose: keep Sophie safe in a world that felt suddenly dangerous. That morning, Rachel had been called in early by the school nurse. Sophie had stumbled in the hallway, shaken and confused. A custodian had been flashing a light in her face, another student reported. Sophie, who couldn't see, had felt heat and movement close to her eyes and panicked, thinking someone was mocking her blindness. Rachel didn't wait for an explanation. She found Marcus near the supply closet, still in his navy coveralls, holding the red-brimmed cap he always removed indoors. He had worked at Jefferson for 6 years. He kept the floors shining and stayed late to fix broken lockers without complaint. But none of that mattered when Rachel saw him lift a flashlight near her daughter's face from the security footage the assistant principal replayed. The image was grainy. Marcus leaned down, beam pointed toward Sophie's eyes. That was enough. Rachel's voice cut through the hallway as she confronted him, her words shaking with rage and heartbreak. Other teachers peeked out from classrooms. Sophie sat on a bench nearby, clutching her white cane, her small shoulders tight. Marcus tried to explain, but Rachel wouldn't hear it. She accused him of cruelty, of humiliating her daughter, of exploiting her disability. She demanded the principal fire him immediately. By noon, Marcus was clearing out his locker. If you were Rachel, would you have paused? Would you have given him the benefit of the doubt? Or would you have done exactly what she did, acting on instinct, on the raw terror that someone might be hurting your child? The story might have ended there. A mother protecting her daughter. A janitor losing his job. Another quiet injustice buried under assumptions. But truth has a way of waiting. 3 days later, Sophie developed a severe headache during math class. She complained of pressure behind her eyes. The nurse, Carol, grew concerned. Sophie had never described pain like that before. Rachel rushed her to Cincinnati Children's Hospital, her heart pounding with old fears she thought she had conquered. Tests followed. MRI scans. Specialists whispering outside the exam room. Late that evening, a neurologist named Dr. Harper sat across from Rachel, her expression careful. She explained that while Sophie had lost most of her vision after the car accident, there had always been minimal residual light perception in one eye. It had never developed further, and doctors had assumed the optic nerve damage was permanent. But now there were signs of unusual activity. Subtle responses to intense light stimulation. Not sight as most people understand it, but something. Rachel's mind drifted backward. The flashlight. Marcus leaning close. Sophie flinching. Dr. Harper asked gently if Sophie had recently been exposed to bright, focused light near her eyes. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. The next morning, she returned to Jefferson Middle School with a knot in her chest. The principal, Harold Bennett, looked uneasy when she requested access to the security footage again. This time, she forced herself to watch every second without letting anger blur her vision. Marcus had not been mocking Sophie. Sophie had dropped a small silver bracelet near the lockers. Marcus, who had noticed she often felt the walls to orient herself, had crouched to help her search. When he found it, He hesitated. Then he pulled out a small penlight from his pocket and shone it gently toward her eyes, moving it slowly side to side. He wasn't grinning. He wasn't taunting. He looked hopeful. Rachel's throat tightened. She learned from another custodian that Marcus's younger brother, Caleb, had been legally blind since birth. Growing up in rural Kentucky, Marcus had spent evenings helping Caleb with sensory exercises, light stimulation therapy recommended by a specialist in Lexington. They had used flashlights in dark rooms, hoping to strengthen neural pathways. It hadn't restored Caleb's sight, but it had helped him detect brightness and movement. Marcus had seen Sophie drop the bracelet. He had recognized the white cane immediately. And in that small, impulsive moment, he had wondered if maybe, just maybe, she might respond to light the way Caleb once had. He hadn't told anyone. He hadn't asked permission. But he hadn't meant harm. Rachel found his address from the school's HR file and drove 2 hours south to a modest duplex in Dayton. She rehearsed her apology the entire way, but when Marcus opened the door, she forgot every word. He looked thinner already, exhaustion etched into his face. Losing the job had hit hard. He was supporting his mother, who was recovering from hip surgery. Temporary work was scarce. Health insurance was gone. Rachel felt the weight of her certainty collapse inside her. She told him about the hospital visit. About Dr. Harper's findings. About the possibility still fragile, still uncertain that Sophie's brain might respond to targeted light therapy. Marcus listened quietly, his eyes glossy. He admitted he should have spoken to a teacher first. He admitted he acted on instinct too. He said he saw Sophie's bracelet and just thought of Caleb. He said sometimes hope makes you reckless. Rachel apologized then, not as a fierce mother, but as a flawed human being. She told him she had let fear speak louder than patience. She told him she had cost him his livelihood. Marcus shook his head slowly and said he understood what it meant to protect someone you love. But understanding didn't pay rent. Rachel returned to Jefferson and met with Principal Bennett. She brought Dr. Harper's written assessment. She explained everything she had learned. She asked no, insisted that they reconsider Marcus's dismissal. She admitted her own role publicly during a staff meeting, her voice trembling as she described how quickly she had judged. The room was quiet in a different way this time. 2 weeks later, Marcus was reinstated. But something else changed too. With Dr. Harper's guidance, Sophie began controlled light stimulation therapy at the hospital. Marcus, with Rachel's permission, occasionally observed the sessions. He never touched the equipment. He simply stood near the door, remembering his brother's quiet courage. Months passed. Progress was slow and uncertain. Sophie began to detect the difference between darkness and bright light in controlled settings. She described it not as seeing, but as sensing warmth and direction. One crisp November afternoon, as sunlight poured through the school's gymnasium windows, Sophie turned her face toward the brightness and smiled without being prompted. Rachel noticed. She glanced across the room and saw Marcus near the bleachers, mop in hand, watching from a respectful distance. Their eyes met, and in that silent exchange was something deeper than apology. It was shared humility. Shared hope. Life did not transform into a miracle montage. Sophie did not suddenly see the world in full color. Marcus did not become a hero in headlines. Rachel did not stop being protective. But they all softened. Rachel began volunteering at a local advocacy group for parents of children with disabilities, speaking honestly about how fear can cloud judgment. Marcus started a small after-school support circle for visually impaired students, sharing practical techniques and quiet encouragement. Sophie grew braver, curious about light in a way she never had been before. Sometimes, the worst mistakes carve open the space where grace can enter. And sometimes, the person you thought was hurting you is the one carrying a piece of your healing. Before this story ends, Take a moment and tell me in the comments, have you ever misjudged someone and later discovered a truth that changed everything? Because if this story stirred something inside you, if it reminded you to pause before condemning, to listen before reacting, to choose compassion even when fear feels louder, then please like, share, and subscribe, but only if it truly touched your heart.